December 26, 1996, 5:52 a.m. A frantic 911 call shatters the silence of a quiet Boulder, Colorado neighborhood. A mother's voice, trembling with panic, reports her 6-year-old daughter missing. A ransom note, nearly 3 pages long, lies on the stairs. Police respond within minutes, expecting a kidnapping. But within 8 hours, the truth proves far more devastating. The child is found deceased in the basement of her own home, a crime so shocking it would captivate the world for nearly 3 decades. And for 28 years, the victim's father has lived under a shadow of suspicion, accused by millions, investigated relentlessly, convicted in the court of public opinion without ever facing trial. Until now, Jon Ramsey, now 80 years old, has finally broken his silence. In his most revealing interview yet, he has admitted things he has never discussed publicly before. Details that could change everything we thought we knew about that Christmas night. Details about mistakes he made, decisions that looked suspicious, evidence that was overlooked, and most importantly, what he believes really happened to his daughter. This is the JonBenét Ramsey case, a mystery that destroyed a family, divided a nation, and left more questions than answers for 28 years. But the technology to solve it exists right now. The DNA evidence is sitting in storage. The genealogical databases are ready. The expertise is available. The only thing missing is the will to use it. And Jon Ramsey, knowing he may not have much time left, is making one final push for justice. Before we examine what Jon Ramsey finally revealed after 28 years of silence, make sure to subscribe to the Investigation Room and hit that notification bell. Here at the Investigation Room, we dive deep into cases that deserve to be remembered. We examine evidence that was overlooked. We analyze testimonies that were dismissed. We push for justice in cases where modern technology could finally provide answers. New comprehensive documentaries every week, focusing on cold cases that could still be solved. If you have followed the JonBenét Ramsey case for years, if you have ever wondered whether the family was really involved, or if the investigation got it wrong from the beginning, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Do you believe the DNA evidence points to an intruder? Now let's examine what Jon Ramsey finally admitted and why it matters. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia. She was the youngest child of John and Patsy Ramsey, joining her older brother Burke, who was 9 years old at the time of her passing. To understand this case, you need to understand the family that was forever changed by it. Jon Ramsey was a successful businessman in 1996. He was president of Access Graphics, a computer services company that had recently grossed over $1 billion in annual revenue. He had built his success through hard work, intelligence, and business acumen. He was respected in the Boulder community, a family man who seemed to have achieved the American dream. Patsy Ramsey was a former Miss West Virginia, crowned in 1977. She had graduated from West Virginia University and had devoted herself to raising their children in their upscale Boulder home, a Tudor-style mansion valued at over $700,000 in 1996. JonBenét had become well known in the child beauty pageant circuit. By age 6, she had won numerous titles: Little Miss Colorado, Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, America's Royale Tiny Miss. Photos and videos of JonBenét in full makeup, elaborate costumes, and styled hair would later become central to media coverage. Some saw a talented, confident child performing with poise beyond her years. Others questioned whether such public exposure at a young age was appropriate. The pageant participation would become a focal point of investigation and speculation. Had someone at these events become interested in JonBenét? Had the public nature of her appearances made her a target? These questions would haunt the investigation for years. Christmas Day, 1996, seemed entirely ordinary for the Ramsey family. They started the morning at home, exchanging gifts around the Christmas tree. JonBenét received a bicycle and other presents. The family spent time together enjoying what appeared to be a normal, happy holiday. In the afternoon, they attended a holiday party at the home of Fleet and Priscilla White, close friends who lived nearby in Boulder. According to multiple witnesses at the party, JonBenét appeared happy and healthy. She played with other children, She ate from the buffet. She showed no signs of distress or illness. She was, by all accounts, a normal 6-year-old girl enjoying Christmas. The Ramseys returned home around 9:30 p.m. Patsy later stated that JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car during the short drive home. John carried her inside and up to her bedroom. Patsy said she put JonBenét to bed still wearing the clothes from the party, too tired for the usual bedtime routine. Burke was sent to bed in his own room. John went to bed around 10 p.m. Patsy stayed up a bit longer preparing for an early morning trip. The family was scheduled to fly to their vacation home in Charlevoix, Michigan, at 7 a.m. on December 26th. The house settled into silence. Lights were turned off. Doors were locked, or so the family believed. What happened in the next 7 hours remains one of the most debated mysteries in American crime history. But what is not debated, what is absolute fact, is that when Patsy Ramsey came downstairs at 5:45 a.m. on December 26th, her daughter was gone, and nothing would ever be the same. At 5:52 a.m. on December 26th, Patsy Ramsey called 911. The call, which has been analyzed thousands of times by experts and investigators alike, lasted 5 minutes and 51 seconds. Patsy's voice on the recording sounds panicked, breathless, terrified. She reported finding a ransom note on the spiral staircase. The note, written on paper from inside the Ramsey home, demanded $18,000 for JonBenét's safe return. That specific amount was nearly identical to John Ramsey's recent bonus from Access Graphics. The 911 operator tried to keep Patsy calm and get essential information. Patsy said she had checked JonBenét's room and found her daughter missing. The operator instructed Patsy not to touch anything and to wait for police. The call ended with Patsy seemingly hanging up the phone, but the recording continued for a few more seconds, and what was captured in those seconds would become one of the most controversial pieces of evidence in the entire case. Audio enhancement technology applied years later revealed sounds in the background after Patsy believed she had hung up. According to experts who analyzed the recording, 3 distinct voices could be heard. John's voice, firm, "We're not speaking to you." Patsy's voice, no longer sounding as panicked, "Help me, Jesus! Help me, Jesus!" And a third voice, a young voice, Burke. Many analysts believed they heard Burke say something that sounded like, "What did you find?" If that was Burke's voice, it meant he was awake during the 911 call. It meant he was downstairs with his parents. It meant the family's statement that Burke was asleep and didn't wake until later was incorrect. This recording would fuel speculation for nearly 3 decades. If the family's memory of Burke being asleep was wrong, what else might they have remembered incorrectly? But the ransom note itself would become even more problematic. At 2.5 pages, it was unusually long for a ransom demand. Most kidnapping notes are brief and direct, just essential information about the demand and the exchange. This note rambled. It threatened. It contained movie references that experts later identified as coming from films like Dirty Harry and Speed. The note began, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business but not the country that it serves. At this time we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter." It went on to demand exactly $18,000 in cash, hundreds, 20s, and 10s in a brown paper bag. It warned John not to contact police, FBI, or anyone else, or there would be consequences for JonBenét. It said they would call between 8:00 and 10:01 a.m. on December 26th, with instructions for delivering the money. It was signed SBTC initials that have never been definitively explained. The note was written with a black Sharpie marker from inside the Ramsey home. The notepad it was written on was found in the house. Investigators discovered that the writer had actually started the note on one page, apparently made a mistake, then tore that page out and started fresh. Both the practice note and the final note were written while the author was inside the Ramsey home. After writing the note, the pad and pen were both returned to their original locations in the kitchen. This suggested someone who was comfortable in the house and not in a hurry to leave. The handwriting analysis would become a major focus of investigation. Experts from around the country compared the note to writing samples from both John and Patsy Ramsey. John was ruled out as the author almost immediately. His handwriting bore no significant similarities to the note. Patsy's handwriting showed some similarities, but experts disagreed on whether she had actually written it. Some said the evidence was inconclusive. Others said she could not be eliminated as the author. No expert definitively stated that Patsy Ramsey wrote the ransom note, but the ambiguity was enough to fuel suspicion for decades. Boulder police officer Rick French arrived at the Ramsey home at 5:59 a.m., just 7 minutes after the initial call. Within the hour, the house filled with people. Detective Linda Arndt arrived and took command. Victim advocates came to support the family. Friends gathered to wait for the ransom call promised between 8:05 and 10:00 a.m. The house, which should have been treated as a potential crime scene from the moment police arrived, became filled with multiple people walking through rooms, touching surfaces, unknowingly compromising potential evidence. This was one of the first critical failures. Officer French did perform an initial search of the house, including the basement. At approximately 6:15 a.m., he went downstairs and checked several rooms. He came to the wine cellar, a small room at the far end of the basement. The door was closed. French opened it, looked inside briefly, saw that it was dark, and moved on without entering or turning on the light. Had he searched more thoroughly, he might have discovered JonBenét at that moment, more than 6 hours before she was actually found. This oversight would haunt Rick French for the rest of his career. The ransom call never came. As the promised time window of 8:00 to 10:00 a.m. passed, tension filled the home. Detective Arndt found herself in an increasingly difficult situation. She was managing the scene with multiple civilians present. Other officers had left to follow leads. At approximately 1 p.m., in a decision that would change everything, Detective Arndt suggested that John Ramsey and Fleet White search the house again, top to bottom, to see if they noticed anything unusual. She wanted them occupied. She thought perhaps they might notice something officers had missed. John Ramsey and Fleet White headed downstairs. They checked the train room where Burke played. They checked the boiler room. They checked storage areas. And then John Ramsey opened the wine cellar door. At 1:05 p.m., John Ramsey saw a white blanket on the floor. He immediately recognized it as a blanket from JonBenét's room. He rushed forward and saw his daughter. He screamed. Fleet White, standing behind him, saw it too. John Ramsey, operating purely on instinct and overwhelming emotion, immediately removed tape from his daughter's mouth and picked her up. He carried her upstairs, through the basement, up the stairs, and laid her on the floor near the Christmas tree in the living room. Detective Arndt, hearing the commotion, saw John Ramsey emerge from the basement carrying JonBenét. The little girl had clearly been deceased for some time. Arndt ordered everyone to step back. She covered JonBenét with a Colorado Avalanche sweatshirt that was nearby. She tried to regain control of what was now clearly a homicide scene, but the damage was done. By moving JonBenét, John Ramsey had unintentionally compromised critical evidence. The position of the body, the placement of items around it, the undisturbed nature of the scene, all of these elements that could have provided crucial information were now altered. Investigators would never know exactly how JonBenét had been originally positioned. They would never know if items had been arranged around her in a specific way. The scene was compromised beyond repair. This moment, more than any other, would fuel suspicion about John Ramsey for years to come. Critics argued that only a guilty person would move evidence and compromise a crime scene. But defenders pointed out that John Ramsey was a father who had just found his daughter. His instinct was not to preserve evidence. It was to get his little girl out of that cold, dark basement, to remove the tape from her mouth, to hold her, to try, however futile the attempt, to save her. The forensic examination performed on December 27th by Dr. John Meyer of the Boulder County Coroner's Office revealed critical details about how JonBenét died. The official cause of death was asphyxiation associated with head trauma. The medical examiner determined that JonBenét had suffered a significant blow to the head, causing a skull fracture. She had also been strangled. The sequence of these injuries was important to understanding what happened. The evidence indicated the head injury came first. This injury would have rendered JonBenét unconscious immediately. Based on physiological responses documented in the examination, medical experts estimated that JonBenét lived for a period of time after receiving the head injury, though she was unconscious throughout. At some point during this window, the strangulation occurred. The method of strangulation involved a cord that had been fashioned into what forensic experts call a ligature device, created using cord and a piece of broken paintbrush belonging to the family. This was not a simple cord tied around the neck. This was a device that required deliberate construction, suggesting premeditation rather than a crime of sudden passion. There were other significant findings. Evidence indicated asphyxiation through the presence of petechial hemorrhages in JonBenét's eyes. The examination also revealed evidence that investigators interpreted as possible indications of assault. Due to the sensitive nature of this case involving a minor, specific details of these findings remain in sealed court documents. What can be stated is that this evidence became a significant factor in the investigation and in theories about what occurred. Undigested pineapple was found in JonBenét's stomach, indicating she had eaten it within approximately 1 to 2 hours before her death. This seemingly minor detail would become crucial and highly controversial, because both John and Patsy Ramsey insisted they had not fed JonBenét pineapple that night. They said she fell asleep in the car on the way home and was put directly to bed. Yet a bowl of pineapple with milk was found on the kitchen table the morning of December 26th. The bowl had fingerprints on it. Testing revealed the fingerprints belonged to Patsy Ramsey and Burke Ramsey, not John. Not JonBenét, just Patsy and Burke. This created an immediate puzzle. If JonBenét ate pineapple within hours of her death, and the bowl on the table contained pineapple, and that bowl had only Patsy and Burke's fingerprints, what did that mean? Did Patsy or Burke give JonBenét pineapple after they got home, and the family simply didn't remember this detail clearly? Or did someone else give her the pineapple, and the existing fingerprints were from an earlier time? This pineapple would become one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the investigation. Investigators also examined the location where JonBenét was found for additional evidence. The wine cellar in the basement was a small, windowless room. A white blanket that belonged to JonBenét had been placed over her. Her favorite pink nightgown was also found nearby, though she was not wearing it. The door to the wine cellar had been secured with a wooden block that acted as a latch. This block had to be deliberately moved to open the door, which explained why Officer French had not entered the room during his initial search. He had opened the door but, seeing only darkness, had not realized the latch needed to be fully disengaged. Near JonBenét's body, investigators found a footprint. The print came from a high-tech brand boot. Investigators checked every shoe owned by every member of the Ramsey family and everyone known to have been in the house recently. The print did not match any of them. It remains unidentified to this day. There was also an unidentified palm print on the wine cellar door. Someone had touched that door, leaving a print that did not match anyone in the family or any known visitors. The basement window showed signs of possible disturbance. The window was found in an open position. There was a suitcase positioned directly under the window on the basement side, as though someone had used it as a step. There was a scuff mark on the wall below the window, consistent with someone's foot pushing against the wall. All of this suggested a possible entry or exit point. However, Boulder police noted that there was a spider web visible in one corner of the window well. They argued that no one could have gone through that window recently without disturbing the web. John Ramsey later pointed out that the spider web was in the corner, not directly across the window opening. Someone climbing through could have avoided the web. He also noted that spiders can rebuild webs quickly, sometimes within hours. The web being present did not definitively prove no one had used the window. This became emblematic of the entire investigation. Evidence that could point toward an intruder was dismissed or explained away. Evidence that could point toward the family was emphasized and built up. Perhaps the most significant evidence in this entire case is the DNA. In 2003, forensic scientists using advancing DNA technology re-examined evidence from the case. They found a DNA profile, male DNA. The sample was small, but it was enough to create a genetic profile. This DNA did not match anyone in the Ramsey family. It did not match John. It did not match Burke. It did not match any friends who had been in the house. When the DNA profile was entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, there was no match. Whoever this DNA belonged to was not in the criminal database. In 2008, using even more advanced technology called touch DNA, forensic scientists tested additional items of JonBenét's clothing. They found more male DNA, and it matched the DNA from the earlier testing. This was significant. The same unknown male's DNA was found in multiple locations, suggesting this person had been in contact with JonBenet. Based on this DNA evidence, Boulder County District Attorney Mary Lacey made an unprecedented move in July 2008. She issued a public letter formally apologizing to the Ramsey family. She stated that DNA testing had shown genetic evidence that pointed away from the family as suspects. She officially exonerated John, Patsy, and Burke Ramsey. John Ramsey was alive to hear this, but Patsy had passed away from ovarian cancer in 2006, 2 years before the exoneration. She died still under public suspicion, never hearing the official statement clearing her name. The DNA exoneration should have ended the debate, but it did not. Many investigators and forensic experts argued that the DNA found on JonBenét's clothing could have been deposited innocently through what's called secondary transfer. Clothing, especially new clothing, can contain DNA from factory workers, packaging employees, store workers, anyone who handled the items during manufacturing and distribution. The amount of DNA found was extremely small, what forensic scientists call a low copy number sample. Touch DNA transfers very easily. A single skin cell, a microscopic amount of sweat or other biological material, these can leave enough DNA to create a profile. But does that DNA necessarily mean that person committed a crime? Or does it just mean their DNA ended up on the clothing somehow through normal handling and contact? This debate continues today among experts. John Ramsey believes the DNA is the key. He has pushed for genetic genealogy testing, the technique that identified the Golden State Killer. If the DNA is from the perpetrator, genetic genealogy could potentially identify that person by finding distant relatives in ancestry databases. But the Boulder Police Department has not committed to this testing method. Some suspect it is because they do not believe the DNA is from the perpetrator. They believe it is contamination or innocent transfer. Others believe it is institutional reluctance to pursue a lead that could prove their original investigation was focused in the wrong direction. The DNA evidence is either proof of an intruder or it represents innocent transfer. And 28 years later, we still do not have a definitive answer to which interpretation is correct. Over the years, multiple theories have been proposed to explain what happened to JonBenét Ramsey. The intruder theory. This theory suggests that someone from outside the family entered the Ramsey home on Christmas night and committed this crime. In this scenario, the intruder may have entered through the basement window, which John Ramsey admits was not properly secured. The latch had been broken for months, and he had not gotten it repaired. The intruder may have even entered earlier in the evening, perhaps while the family was at the Christmas party, and hidden in the house waiting for everyone to go to sleep. This person knew the layout of the house. They knew where JonBenét's bedroom was located. They knew their way around. Remember, the Ramsey home had been part of a holiday home tour just weeks before Christmas. Hundreds of people had walked through the house, including the basement. The Ramseys had also employed numerous contractors, housekeepers, and workers who had access to the home over the years. The house had undergone renovations. People had been in and out regularly. According to this theory, the intruder went to JonBenét's room sometime after midnight. He either woke her or carried her while she was sleeping. The intruder may have told JonBenet they were going to see a surprise. She may have gone willingly, not understanding the danger. At some point, the intruder gave JonBenet pineapple, perhaps from the bowl that had been left out. This would explain why pineapple was in her stomach, but why the Ramseys had no memory of feeding it to her. The assault occurred in the basement. At some point, whether JonBenet made noise or resisted, or simply because the intruder was violent, he struck her on the head, rendering her unconscious. Later, the strangulation occurred. After JonBenet had died, the intruder faced a problem. He was in a house with a deceased child. The family was upstairs. What should he do? He could not just leave without raising immediate alarm. He needed time to get away. That is when he wrote the ransom note. Using materials from inside the house, he crafted an elaborate fake kidnapping scenario. The note was meant to buy time. If everything had gone according to plan, the Ramseys would have spent the entire day waiting for a ransom call that never came, believing their daughter had been taken and was alive somewhere. This would have given him hours to get far away from Boulder before the body was discovered. He never anticipated that John Ramsey would search the basement and find JonBenét within hours of the 911 call. His plan fell apart, but by then he was long gone. Evidence supporting the intruder theory. The unidentified male DNA found on JonBenét's clothing. The unidentified high-tech boot print near her body. The unidentified palm print on the wine cellar door. The basement window being unsecured. The suitcase positioned under the window as though used as a step. No member of the family has ever been arrested or charged despite decades of investigation. The ransom note, while strange, could have been written by someone trying to create confusion and buy time. Challenges to the intruder theory. How did the intruder know the exact amount of John's bonus? $18,000. Why was the ransom note so long and elaborate instead of brief like most kidnapping demands? How did the intruder know the layout of the house so well, including finding Patsy's paintbrush? Why didn't the family dog bark if a stranger was in the house? The DNA could potentially be explained by innocent transfer rather than criminal contact. The family involvement theory. This theory suggests that someone within the Ramsey family was involved in JonBenét's death, and that the ransom note was created to cover up what actually happened. There are several variations of this theory. Some theorists suggested that the death was accidental and was covered up to look like a kidnapping. In this scenario, something happened in the house that night, an accident or an argument that got out of hand, and JonBenét was injured. The family then panicked and created the ransom note to provide an alternative explanation. Other versions of this theory suggested that one person in the family was responsible, and other family members helped cover it up, either knowingly or unknowingly. The grand jury indictment, which was revealed years later, charged John and Patsy with child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. This wording suggested the jury believed someone in the house was responsible, and that there had been a cover-up, though they did not specify who actually caused JonBenét's death. Evidence cited by those who support family involvement theories. The ransom note was written on paper from inside the house using a pen from inside the house. The ransom amount matched John's bonus, which was insider knowledge. The note was unusually long and seemed to contain movie references that a movie fan might know. Patsy's handwriting could not be ruled out as the note's author, the pineapple. Evidence suggests JonBenét ate it after coming home, contradicting the family's statement that she went straight to bed. The family hired lawyers and limited cooperation with police early on, which some viewed as suspicious. No definitive evidence of a break-in was found. The family's behavior after the discovery seemed unusual to some observers. Challenges to family involvement theories. The DNA. Evidence from an unknown male. No member of the family has ever been arrested. Despite intensive investigation, multiple handwriting experts could not definitively link Patsy to the ransom note. The construction of the ligature device suggests knowledge and calculation that would be unusual in an accidental death scenario. The 2008 official exoneration based on DNA evidence, John Ramsey voluntarily submitted to extensive interviews, polygraph tests, and DNA testing. The family's behavior could be explained by grief, shock, and following legal advice, rather than guilt. Other theories. Some investigators looked at specific individuals who had connection to the Ramsey family or to JonBenét through the pageant circuit. Several suspects were investigated over the years, including convicted criminals who were in the Boulder area at the time. DNA testing has ruled out everyone who has been tested so far. What is clear is that this case has more questions than answers. The investigation into JonBenét Ramsey's death has been widely criticized as one of the most mishandled cases in modern American law enforcement history. The failures began within the first hour. When Officer Rick French arrived at 5:59 a.m., the house should have been immediately secured as a potential crime scene. Instead, friends and victim advocates were allowed inside. Multiple people walked through the house, touched surfaces, and unknowingly compromised potential evidence. Officer French searched the basement but did not thoroughly check the wine cellar. Had he turned on the light and stepped inside, he would have found JonBenét more than 6 hours earlier. The condition of the scene at that point might have provided crucial evidence about timing and positioning. Detective Arndt found herself alone managing a house full of civilians during a critical period. She was overwhelmed and under-supported. Her decision to have John Ramsey and Fleet White search the house led directly to the body being moved and the crime scene being further compromised. The Boulder Police Department had limited experience with homicide investigations. Boulder was a relatively safe college town. The detectives assigned to this case had never worked a murder involving a child before. They were unprepared for the complexity of the case and the intense media attention it would generate. The investigation quickly became focused on the family as suspects. This focus was understandable given statistics showing most child victims know their attacker, but it also created tunnel vision that prevented thorough investigation of other possibilities. Potential suspects outside the family were not pursued as aggressively. Background checks on contractors and workers who had been in the home were incomplete. The relationship between the Ramsey family and Boulder police became adversarial early on. The family hired lawyers and limited their cooperation. Police viewed this as suspicious. The family viewed the police as having already decided they were guilty. This breakdown in cooperation meant that interviews were delayed, information was not shared freely, and both sides worked against each other rather than together toward finding the truth. The media circus made everything worse. Television cameras surrounded the house. Reporters camped out in the neighborhood. Tabloids offered money for inside information. Details of the investigation leaked constantly. Evidence was discussed publicly before it was fully analyzed. Theories were presented as facts. The case became entertainment rather than a serious criminal investigation. The grand jury process in 1998-1999 was supposed to bring clarity. After 13 months of testimony and review of evidence, the jury voted to indict, but District Attorney Alex Hunter made the decision not to sign the indictment. He believed the case was too weak to win at trial. The DNA evidence created reasonable doubt. The evidence was entirely circumstantial. Hunter knew that putting the Ramseys on trial and then having them acquitted would be worse than not charging them at all. An acquittal would prevent them from ever being charged again. At least by not filing charges, the case remained open, but this decision satisfied no one. The Ramseys remained under suspicion. The public felt justice had been denied. The investigation remained in limbo. For 28 years, this case has been stuck in that limbo. The JonBenét Ramsey case changed how law enforcement across America handles child death investigations. Police departments studied the mistakes made in Boulder and updated their protocols. The importance of immediately securing crime scenes, separating witnesses, and bringing in experienced investigators became standard teaching. The case also changed how America thought about child beauty pageants. Images of JonBenét in full makeup and elaborate costumes sparked national debate about whether such competitions were appropriate for young children. Some pageants changed their rules about makeup and costumes for the youngest age groups. Others defended the programs as building confidence and teaching performance skills. The media coverage of the case also changed journalism standards, though not always for the better. The intense tabloid attention, the constant speculation, the treatment of the Ramsey family as guilty before any charges were filed. All of this raised questions about media responsibility in covering criminal cases. But perhaps the most profound impact has been on the Ramsey family itself. John Ramsey has lived with this burden for 28 years. Think about that for a moment. Nearly 3 decades of being suspected of harming your own child. Nearly 3 decades of people crossing the street to avoid you, whispering when you walk into a room, sending hate mail and death threats. Nearly 3 decades of being unable to properly grieve your daughter because you are too busy defending yourself against accusations. John Ramsey has maintained his innocence consistently and absolutely from day one. He has never wavered in his account of events. He has submitted to police interviews. He has provided DNA samples for testing. He has taken polygraph examinations. He has cooperated with every reasonable request while also protecting his family's legal rights. He watched his wife Patsy battle ovarian cancer while under the shadow of suspicion. Patsy was diagnosed in 1993, went into remission, but the cancer returned in 2002. She fought the disease while dealing with the ongoing investigation and public scrutiny. She passed away on June 24, 2006, at age 49, never seeing her name officially cleared, never seeing her daughter's case solved. One of Patsy's last wishes was that the investigation would continue and that whoever was responsible for JonBenét's death would be found. Jon Ramsey also watched his son Burke, who was only 9 years old when his sister died, grow up under public suspicion. Burke was interviewed by police and social workers in the days and weeks after JonBenét's death. He was cleared of involvement, but conspiracy theories persisted online that perhaps he had accidentally caused his sister's death and the parents had covered it up. In 2016, a CBS documentary strongly implied that Burke was responsible. Burke sued CBS. The case was eventually settled out of court. And through it all, Jon Ramsey has insisted that an intruder took his daughter's life. He has never stopped pushing for the investigation to continue. He has never stopped demanding that the evidence be properly tested with modern technology. He has never given up hope that justice will eventually be served. Now, at 80 years old, Jon Ramsey has given what may be his most revealing interview yet. He spoke with a clarity and directness that surprised even longtime followers of the case. He is not trying to convince anyone of anything anymore. He is not worried about public opinion. He simply wants the truth to come out before he dies. Jon Ramsey is calling for the Boulder Police Department to submit the DNA evidence for genealogical DNA testing. This is the same technology that solved the Golden State Killer case after 4 decades. It is the same technology that has solved dozens of cold cases in recent years. Genealogical DNA testing works by uploading crime scene DNA to public genealogy databases like GEDmatch. These databases contain DNA from millions of people who have submitted samples to learn about their ancestry. When crime scene DNA is uploaded, the system searches for matches, not just to the specific individual, but to anyone who shares genetic markers that would indicate a family relationship. If the person whose DNA is at the crime scene has any relatives, even distant cousins, who have submitted DNA to these databases, investigators can identify them. They can then build a family tree, working backward and forward through generations until they identify the individual whose DNA would match the crime scene sample. It is not guesswork, it is genetic genealogy, and it is proven to work. The Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo, was caught this way in 2018 after evading capture for over 40 years. Investigators uploaded crime scene DNA to GEDmatch, found distant relatives, built a family tree, and eventually identified DeAngelo as the suspect. His DNA was then tested directly and matched perfectly. He was arrested, tried, and convicted. This same process could potentially identify who left DNA at the crime scene in the Ramsey case. The DNA from the evidence could be uploaded. Family connections could be identified. A family tree could be built. A suspect could be named. And after 28 years, there could finally be answers. But as of now, Boulder police have not committed to using this technology publicly. They have made statements about using all available resources and exploring all avenues, but they have not confirmed they will pursue genealogical DNA testing. The frustration in Jon Ramsey's voice when discussing this is evident. He is 80 years old. He knows he may not live many more years. He wants to see his daughter's case solved before he passes. He wants his family's name finally and fully cleared beyond any doubt. He wants justice for JonBenét. And the technology exists to potentially make all of that happen. But it requires the police department to take action. In the interview, Jon Ramsey addressed what he believes is resistance from Boulder police regarding genealogical DNA testing. He thinks the resistance stems partly from institutional concerns and partly from the complication that if genealogical DNA identifies someone outside the family, it would prove that the investigation was focused in the wrong direction for years. But Jon Ramsey says he does not care about any of that. He is not interested in lawsuits or seeking vindication against the police department. He just wants answers. He just wants the case solved. He is willing to put the past behind if it means finally finding out what happened to his daughter. The tragedy of the JonBenét Ramsey case extends far beyond her death. It is a tragedy of investigative failures, where initial mistakes compounded over time until the case became stuck. It is a tragedy of media exploitation, where a child's death became tabloid content, and her grieving family became entertainment. It is a tragedy of public rush to judgment, where millions of people formed opinions based on speculation rather than evidence. It is a tragedy that a family was torn apart by accusation, when they should have been supported through unimaginable grief. It is a tragedy that evidence which could potentially solve this case has been sitting in storage while the technology to analyze it has been available for years. And perhaps most of all, it is a tragedy that if someone outside the family was responsible, that person has been free for 28 years. JonBenét Ramsey would be 34 years old today if she had lived. She would have graduated from high school and college. She might have pursued a career in any number of fields. She might have gotten married and had children of her own. She might have done 1,000 different things with her life, but she was denied all of that on Christmas night in 1996. The least we can do, the absolute minimum we owe to her memory, is to make sure her case is investigated with every available tool. The least we can do is let her father see progress before he passes. The least we can do is use the technology that is available to potentially solve this case after 28 years. What do you think happened to JonBenét Ramsey? Do you believe the DNA evidence points away from the family? Do you think genealogical DNA testing could finally bring answers to this case after 28 years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is a case that has divided public opinion for decades, and hearing different perspectives helps us all think more critically about the evidence. If you believe this case deserves modern investigative techniques, if you believe technology should be used to pursue every available lead, hit that like button. Help spread awareness of this case. Help keep it in the public eye. Your engagement with this content actually matters. It keeps this case visible. It reminds law enforcement that people are still watching, still caring, still hoping for answers. Subscribe to the Investigation Room for more in-depth examinations of cases that deserve attention. We cover cases where modern technology could still make a difference, cases where answers are still possible. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. The technology exists to potentially bring new information in JonBenét Ramsey's case. The DNA evidence exists in storage, preserved and available for testing. The genealogical databases are there, containing DNA from millions of people. The expertise exists among forensic genealogists who have solved dozens of similar cases. Everything needed to potentially move this case forward is available right now. John Ramsey has spent 28 years seeking answers for his family and for his daughter. He has cooperated with investigations. He has submitted to testing and interviews. He has done everything asked of him. At some point, the focus must shift to using every available tool to seek the truth. This investigation was presented with respect for JonBenét and her family. Our goal is to keep this case in the public eye, to advocate for the use of modern technology, and to honor a little girl whose case remains unsolved after 28 years. We believe every victim deserves justice. We believe every case deserves the best investigative tools available. We believe the truth matters. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing that this case still deserves attention and resources. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was 6 years old when she died. She loved to sing. She loved to dance. She loved to perform. She had dreams and a future. She deserves answers. And her father, at 80 years old, deserves to see progress in her case. The technology exists. The evidence exists. Action must follow. Justice for JonBenét Ramsey.